I realized that I never film intros holding the mic. And now that I'm holding the mic, this feels kind of fun. I feel like an MC, like... I feel ridiculous. Okay, wait, putting it back in the stand. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Safari Pedals Show. I'm your host, Abby. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Crazy Wild Safari Pedals Podcast Zoo Thing bandwagon. It's great to have y'all here on board. Today is a very exciting day here in the Abby Safari Ether because Hill Kourkoutis is going to be on the show. She's an awesome producer, musician, engineer. She does so many cool things. We're going to be diving into all things production with her journey, her approach, her philosophy to it all. Without further ado, I will cut my blabbing and let's cut to the episode. So guys, please give a very warm Safari welcome to Hill Kourkoutis. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hopping on. I really appreciate your time. So before we dive into all the good stuff, let's start with who you are, what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, so my name is Hill. I am from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Producer, mixer, recording engineer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist.
I'd love to dive in, since you've worked on so many cool projects, when it comes to production in general, like, have you over time developed kind of like a general philosophy for production, any kind of like principles that guide you in your work?
Given my history as an artist, first and foremost, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me have been to create a holistic environment and build trust off the bat, because I always felt as an artist in the room, it was really hard to be vulnerable and genuine in the studio if you didn't feel like you were being taken seriously. So that's one of the first kind of guiding principles. This studio is a safe space for me. It's very sacred. And an artist should be able to trust you. And if an artist can't trust me, I can't do my best job for them. I guess the other thing is, and this might sound a little crazy, but I truly, and of course I love things to be technically beautiful, but I truly believe in capturing the moment, and sometimes the moment isn't perfect, but if the moment is beautiful and it serves the song and the narrative, then that's my ultimate goal. So it's more of a vibe space rather than spending hours ensuring that we have the cleanest signal ever. I like things to be kind of grimy.
I love that, but that, there's a lot of beauty in the grime and the emotion lies there. I absolutely love that. And I want to go back and touch on what you said about creating that really safe and vulnerable space for an artist. This podcast in general is centered around being an up-and-coming producer, engineer starting out. Do you have any kind of pointers for new producers and engineers who may be doing things unbeknownst to them that may not make that space 100% comfortable for the artist, little like things that they can, I don't know, little nuances that you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just quickly realized that it's not about me ever, and I think that if you remind yourself of that, if you remember that every single thing that we do is to be in service of supporting an artist. And if that's at the forefront, if that mindfulness is there, I feel that it's very hard to not create that type of environment, and what I tend to do is actually build a relationship and chemistry before we even get into a room to record together. Because I feel like that time spent before, you can't build trust the first day on the job and expect to have that space that you want to have created. So I think that the friendship building, the relationship building, the chemistry building is what allows that trust to build. Because as you and I know, trust doesn't come in an instant. I think you need to truly understand people as human beings on a personal level in order to have that trust. So yeah, we'll have a lot of conversations, and it's not just about, inspiration for a recording or an album, but it's getting to know each other as people. I want to understand their life story. Because the life story is wrapped up in their art inherently, right? And if you have no context for the human behind the art or the song, you're not going to understand the music that you're trying to capture either. So yeah, the relationship building, I think you can't really go wrong there. If you have that there, and there is a personal connection and understanding of each other, then I believe that environment just builds itself, you know?
I absolutely love that. And it's such an interesting thing. Like, we're about like 60 something episodes into the podcast, and every producer and engineer I've interviewed that does this full time without fail has said, like, the most important thing, it's all about the relationships, all about the vibe, all about the interpersonal. And I love that keeps coming up because it shows how true it is. I feel like in a world of so much marketing and products, like, to really hear from the people that do this full time, like, this is what it's about. Like, let's kind of cut through all of the other noises.
Yeah, and we're in the art of emotions, you know? Like, you know, at the end of the day, people want their music to be heard, but I truly believe that the music that's heard and that hits people is the music that's genuine. You can't really think your way through this process. I think it's something that has to unravel, and it's our job to kind of be facilitators for an artist. And I think if we know what the artist's motivations and goals are, both commercially, personally, and artistically going into it, then we can be there as guides and observers and just create the right environment for the artist to just be who they are. And those are the recordings that, to me, when I listen to my favorite albums, you can tell that's what happened. There's like an alchemy to it. There's a magic that has to be captured, and you can't plan that a lot of the time.
Guys, embrace the magic. Embrace the emotions,
the magic.
Yes, that absolutely sounds like the right path. And I love how you also like have that perspective, like being an artist first. Like, you've really been on, like, you can say, the other side of the glass. So like having that additional perspective, I'm sure, has really come in handy, like when you're in a session.
For sure. I mean, and being a songwriter, I see that side. I've also been a musician for hire. That's like played as a multi-instrumentalist for artists on the road. So I've seen kind of all sides, and I know that as an artist, what kind of created the most ideal environment for me to kind of be successful versus not. So I am very mindful of those things. I think it's not so conscious anymore. But at first I felt like I was really mindful in terms of what environment allows an artist to thrive versus the things that stifle them, you know? And I think having check-ins with an artist throughout the process is really important, you know, because even with all these steps that I'm talking about, there are times where you might get stifled throughout the process, or maybe we get in our heads and it becomes cerebral. So I think that the check-ins with the artists are integral to just ensuring that we're both kind of sharing the same vision and that we're on the same path.
That's awesome. I love the check-ins, like really intentionally doing that. I'm going to take that one for sure.
I do like a wellness thing every morning. I'm like, so how are we feeling today? How do we feel about yesterday? You know, and I think that time of sharing and just kind of seeing where everyone's at allows you to make sure that you're still on the mark and that like you are being as supportive as possible as well.
I absolutely love that. I also wanted to ask you, maybe this is more on a businessy side of things. Do you have any tips, pieces of advice for producers and engineers that are starting out, in addition to all the relationships, but kind of like it can be maybe some business tips on how to have a long career rather than just kind of, because I feel like there's a lot of talk of, you know, you have to get in the room and then you get your big break and a chance and it kind of sets you up for those opportunities. But how do you make that last over time? Do you have any pointers?
I think it's important to know, and I don't mean brand in the sense of like a commercial brand, but I think every producer is unique. And I don't think that there's one producer that's like a one size fits all for every artist. I know that my style of production or my approach to production isn't necessarily conducive to every artist's goals, you know? So I think the most important thing is to understand who you are as a producer. And each of us has strengths and weaknesses. And I think if you know what your strengths and your weaknesses are and what you can contribute, that becomes a part of your brand building, you know? And part of that success, I think, is ensuring that you are being paired with the right artists, you know, and that the right artists are benefiting off of what your contributions can be. So I'd say like having that, being mindful of that is number one. After that, I think it's just a matter of creating a model that works for you. Like there is a business model, I think, that can be adopted for anybody. And, you know, for example, my business model is I know that I'm a holistic type of producer. I care about the artist first and foremost. And I like the fluidity of the process. I try to keep the process open, you know, so I know that about myself. And I have my own recording studio at home, and I've done that with the intention of adding to that holistic quality. So there's no eyes on the clock worrying about going overtime in a commercial studio here. And I've made it so that I can essentially record anything within the space if that's what the artist wants. Also, just for budget reasons, I'm able to do everything in house, but there's also the flexibility of being able to go to other studios. So all these things have been business decisions that I've made to create more sustainability for myself, so that I'm not relying on other people or spaces to get things done. And I also, because I'm a multi-instrumentalist, for example, I can play everything on a recording, or I'm able to hire whoever we want for the recording. But that spectrum of flexibility is always there to make the process accessible for any spectrum of any artist.
I want to highlight for all of the viewers watching, I really love what you said about flexibility kind of in your business model, not only being able to record multiple things, but like really to put a lot of intentionality and mindfulness into building your space. So for anyone starting out like me over here, like really keeping that in mind when it comes time to set up a space. And also, like you said, really putting an emphasis on what the artist needs. Like, how can this space serve them the best? So I'm definitely gonna be taking that one forward.
So I think of this as a marathon too. Like when I started, I literally had an interface with like 2 inputs, and that's it. And that didn't stop me from making recordings for people. It's just over time, as I kind of learned what my workflow was and the sounds that I enjoyed, I slowly started acquiring pieces of gear and building my studio, around a setup where, and at first it was kind of like tearing down the setup and then buying a whole new rig. But now, thinking about the longevity of everything, I would say take the time to invest in the pieces of gear that you want, that are going to help elevate your sound and your career. Because these are all tools that I think add to the quality of our work. And so whereas before I was just trying to find the cheapest thing to build things around, I was like, no, I have the cheap thing right now that I can do my work with. And now the next steps is I'm going to save for the thing that is going to help not only enhance my work, but also be kind of like the brain that I'm going to build my larger rig around, So eventually I really loved the UA Apollo system because it gave me a lot of flexibility. And I knew that I wanted to work towards like an analog digital hybrid setup, for example. So eventually, I started to know that. So I started off with the interface, and then I started to build my outboard setup around that for my home studio. So I think that also saves you money in the long term, because you're not trying to overhaul your entire setup every single time. But at the end of the day, these tools all help us and they matter, but don't let that stop you from thinking that you can't make quality work in box either, because I did that for years and it worked really well for me. And it also was accessible, and I was able to scale my business as my clientele grew. I was able to scale the setup as well.
I absolutely love that. And I love how you also kind of laid it out in like the journey sense, because it can feel daunting in the beginning, and you see all these studios and it's like, I want 1,000 distressors, and it's like so easy to get in that like loop.
You can always go to those studios,
Yeah.
And that, even for me, because I knew that like I'm in Toronto and we have some really beautiful studios in this city. So I know that, whether I go in any direction, I have access to all that stuff. So for my studio, I kind of based it more upon like boutique gear, because I knew that I couldn't get those things necessarily at those other studios. So yeah, it was a bit more of a like, how can I create color and have that, like, for example, I love tube stuff. So I wanted, some tube pieces so that I can record things the way that I want, so that I could get that sound. Yeah, but you don't necessarily need like $1 million studio to make great records.
To sum up everything we spoke about, I really love to ask our guests either to drop, it can be a piece of advice or just anything you want to say to the amazing Safari Pedals world. So do you have any additional things to drop to the people?
Choose the projects that bring you passion and excitement, because that's what's ultimately going to lead to sustainability and more work. I think if people are having fun in your studio and working with you, and you're having fun doing it, like that adds to the dynamic in the relationship of things. And at first, I think if you don't know necessarily what you want to be doing, and you're still kind of at that starting of the journey of being overwhelmed by what to do, just do everything. Because I think it's in finding out what you like versus not like, that you truly kind of refine your vision and your direction. And so, yeah, at the beginning, I think it's important at the beginning to do everything, work with everybody, figure out what your strengths, your weaknesses are, and build that skill set of building relationships. Because at the end of the day, we are in the business of emotions, and human relationships. So that's fundamental, I think, to understanding the people we work with.
That's amazing. Such great pieces of advice. I got a lot to think about. Like, my brain wheels are majorly turning. So thank you for sharing that and for hopping on and dropping so much wisdom.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Track me, I run up the racks like an athlete. Big facts, you're the dick, 6 flags, ballin' like dick. Told her I love her, I ain't really mean